Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to our May episode of our Great Books program, where every month we delve into one of the great books of human history, either ancient or modern, either East or West, and across a range of topics and categories. I want to just say, coming into this call, I have been very profoundly struck by the synchronicity of choosing this book, You Are the Placebo, by Joe Dispenza, given the pandemic that we're all in and the hysteria at the highest levels of government and the media and our medical establishments around COVID-19, the pandemic, and the social distancing, the face masks, the paranoia that we've had of being felled by a virus coming initially, I guess, out of China and sweeping the world with such force that we human beings have done something we've never done before in all of our history. For the first time ever, all of us at the same time have experienced the same thing. And the response was almost essentially and universally to shut everything down. That seems incredible if you think about it. That the whole world would shut itself down, send everybody to their rooms, and tell people not to touch one another. That's the pandemic that we're in. And it provides an extraordinary opportunity for deep reflection. It's almost as if Mother Nature sent us all to our rooms through the pandemic and told us to just sit in the corner, think big thoughts, and see if we could behave a little better when the whole thing was over. I've been sitting here in Amsterdam for 3 months. I haven't touched another human being. I want everybody to just think that thought. Wherever you are, you're under lockdown, I dare say. We've never engaged in social distancing before, ever. We've crowded into stadiums, we've crowded into cafes, we crowd on the beach. Human beings are social animals. And here we are so afraid of getting this bug that we're not even touching one another. Think about that for a second. And we all did it willingly, submissively, and universally. And some countries did it under martial law. There are many ways to respond to this, and the extraordinary timing of this book, You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza, provides me with the opportunity to talk about my favorite teacher right now, and a line of reasoning and formula that can protect us better than any flu shot. So what I'm going to be showing you in just a few minutes is a video. But before I do that, I want to say a word about Joe Dispenza. I would say that he's the first contemporary teacher that I know about that I would say has really cracked some fundamental codes in his understanding of how people change. I've said to a number of my colleagues that I consider Joe Dispenza to be the first post-axial teacher. The Dalai Lama, for example, is a great teacher, but he's completely axial. He's completely bound within the structures, metaphysics, doctrine, and practices of Tibetan Buddhism. Pope Francis seems to be a very nice guy, but he's bound within the structures, the metaphysics, the rituals, the practices of the Catholic Church. Think of most of the so-called New Age teachers. They're bound within the structures, the metaphysics, the rituals and practices of New Age spirituality. Until Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza has done something that nobody else that I know of has done. And that is he's teaching the deepest layers of mystical truth, but doing it beyond the jargon that has been encrusting this mystical truth, in some cases, for thousands of years. Thousands of years. He stripped it all away. And he teaches through the language of science. And as he says, science is the contemporary language of mysticism. Because he understands what the axial teachers do not. And that is the incrustations of jargon and tradition around truth separates that which is common. And that's why we have all these wars. And that's why we have all this conflict, which is intensifying in various parts of the world. Joe Dispenza has stripped it all away. And the efficacy of what he is now teaching is seen in the fact that people are being healed of major diseases, fourth-stage cancers, blindness, deafness, Parkinson's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, depressions, childhood traumas in significant numbers. And again, think about most of the teachers that you know. You see, whether it's on the Shift Network or whatever, it's all blah, blah, blah. It's all jargon. They're all talking eloquently from their heads. And people kind of feel good for a while, but nothing really much changes. Joe Dispenza is changing people by the hundreds and the thousands. And in fact, you can't even get into his events. He's the only teacher I know of that sells out every one of his in-person events like Super Bowl tickets or a Rolling Stone concert within minutes. I tried to get into his event in Vienna. This was before the lockdown. They postponed it now. And I went in 30 minutes after the tickets were open and they were already all sold out. I can't think of another spiritual teacher anywhere that sells out anything. And he sells out everything. And I think this is the reason. When he was 23, he was participating in a triathlon event. I don't know the details, but he was hit by a truck. He was run over by a truck. And the doctors told him that he was going to be paralyzed probably for the rest of his life. And what he could do, the only thing they could think of to do, is do some major surgeries. He had 6 breaks in his lower back where the truck ran over him. They would put these steel rods in his back, and he would never be able to move much, but at least he would be able to be upright. And this 23-year-old said no. And 12 weeks later, he walked away perfectly whole. Take that in. In 12 weeks, he mended his own back through thought alone, linked to elevated emotions, through envisioning a future beyond the broken back where he was whole. Obviously, that changed his life. And he dedicated the rest of his life to trying to understand how that could happen. And he's been teaching what he's known. He was part of What the Bleep, if you remember that movie that was a kind of a sensation, I don't know, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. He was part of that. And he kept at it and kept at it and kept at it and kept refining his knowledge of how and why he was able to heal himself. You know, the great line out of the Gospels, physician, heal thyself. You can tell others how to heal, but can you heal yourself? Joe Dispenza can heal himself. And I think that's what makes him a great teacher. And I think that's what qualifies his books as great books. When you read his books, you're dealing with someone who actually knows from personal experience what he's talking about. It's not theoretical. It's not jargon. It's concrete, formulaic processes by which all of us can heal ourselves if we put in the time, the effort, the intention, and the will. So we want to explore today the phenomenon of the impossible. Truck runs over a young man, breaks his back in 6 different places. The doctors proclaim him basically a paraplegic. And 12 weeks later, he walks away whole. How did he do that? How can you do that? How can I do that? At one level, we know it's perfectly possible. And at another level, particularly in reference to ourselves, for the most part, we think it's impossible. Why? Why don't people heal? So I would like to share my screen just to kind of loosen all of our psyches and minds and hearts up. And I want to show you a little 7-minute clip of people firewalking.
Jim, send it to me, then I'll share it. I know how to turn on the audio for that.
Oh, okay, hold on one second, everybody. I will share it. I'll send it to Georg.
Or just here in the chat of Zoom, it also works.
Oh, okay. And I want you to contemplate, and I chose this particular video because it's just ordinary people working themselves up and then walking over a bed of burning coals. And not a single one of them had any injury to their feet.
Sorry, it continues. I will continue sharing. We're not done yet.
Just the thing. The Roy Castle Foundation, a charity named after the original presenter of this very programme, organised a fiesta of firewalking in Liverpool. A team of experts were on hand to make sure that no one went home with toasted tootsies. Members of the public went through a demanding training session before they were allowed to complete a walk across burning embers. Firewalking is all about positive thinking, and the volunteers had to prove that they were ready to take up the challenge. Then it was time to put the training to the test and walk on real fire. They all completed a 20-foot firewalk. Well done, guys! But the highlight of the evening was an attempt to break the British firewalking record by 4 members of the Blaze team. They had to walk across 18 metres of burning embers to break the British record. And they did it!
We're Enslave record breakers! Fire walking. Bare feet coming into contact with charcoal hotter than an oven. Regulars from the Crown and Hart pub in Bishopscleeve in Gloucestershire have decided to have a go. That includes 2 women from the charity which will benefit from their efforts, but they only turned up to cheer the others along. And as the fire gets stoked up to ensure a good supply of glowing embers, they begin to realise what they've let themselves in for.
I'm scared stiff. We came out and looked at it and it is 6 foot high, the flames, and that particularly is quite scary. They do say it's going to die down.
I must admit I feel really frightened, and I'm especially worried because I've got nail polish on my toes and I've been told that's flammable.
When these flames die down and the embers are glowing, 19 people will walk across this giant barbecue. At 1200 degrees Fahrenheit you could cheerfully cook sausages on it. Goodness knows what it could do to your toes. While the firewalkers are off undergoing training, the hot coals are raked over. There's no trickery, the heat is real. The group is ready, the walk begins. Claire and Rebecca's nerve held out, they've made it.
It was incredibly exciting, the build-up, and when you get there, you just go for it, and it doesn't feel like anything, but you just feel so elated. It's marvellous, absolutely wonderful.
The adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah.
My legs are still shaking.
Pub landlady Carrie Finney hesitated, but then decided to go ahead.
So my adrenaline were pumping, and he stopped me, and I thought no, and it were all going orange and red, and I thought no, I can't do it. And then he stood in front of me and he said, you can do it, you can do this, and I just thought, sod it, sorry, sod it. And I went for it, and it was a fantastic feeling, absolutely amazing feeling, and it's going to take me days to come down.
And after such a baptism of fire, it's safe to assume that most of the walkers hot-footed it straight to the bar.
I think that was it. Right, Jim?
Thank you, Georg. As I indicated, I wanted people to experience that, both in terms of the ordinariness of the people who performed, the dynamic quality of the music, where you felt yourself getting worked up, and by the end of it, you felt you could do some fire walking. Because I wanted to just parse that experience. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because they changed their mind about something. And all of them succeeded. Not a single one of those people were burnt. So there's also something about a collective intent that begins to take place. By the way, Georg, I'm up in a little box at the top of the screen, not in the center of the screen. Is that normal?
Well, you appear normal to me, and I think people can also see you fine. You guys write something in the chat.
That's what I would check.
Things seem normal on my end. Maybe it's because you
good.
don't have your Zoom maximized.
So let's talk about the book. You Are the Placebo. And first of all, I want to just define placebo. Placebo comes from the Greek word meaning to please. And it's been used as a reference for mind over matter phenomena for many centuries now. They started, actually the first investigation of the placebo effect happened in 1799. And there was an English doctor named John Hogarth who was infuriated at all the sham medicine and all the trickery that was going on. And at that time, you know, whether it was witchcraft or folk remedies or superstitions, there was a lot of that going around. And he set out to prove that this stuff didn't work. So at the time, there was someone who was selling metal rods that he asserted that if you held this metal rod against your body, it would magically extract toxins from your body. And what John Hogarth did was to get wooden rods that he painted to look like metal rods. And he had some people do the wooden rods, thinking they were metal rods. And 80% of them were cured of their rheumatoid arthritis. And so that which he was seeking to disprove ended up working. There's a famous story of a doctor in the United States Civil War. And he was treating the wounded. And he ran out of morphine. And the wounded just kept coming in. And not knowing what to do, he just had the idea, well, I'll just tell them this is morphine. And lo and behold, many of the men receiving the placebo didn't experience any pain when he was amputating their legs or doing surgery on various parts of their body. It's really an extraordinary thing, the placebo. Every study in the United States has to have a placebo aspect because you've got to prove that your drug works better than the placebo. And so I'd like to think about the placebo, and obviously we've showed you something on firewalking. You remember, some of you, my great books on Paramahansa Yogananda, the autobiography of a yogi, where he experienced one miraculous event after another. Miracles happen. We all know that. Cures happen. People go to Lourdes. People go to Chartres to be healed. There's all kinds of miraculous healings all the way down through history. And so we know that that's true. And the placebo that we're going to discuss today is one small aspect of a general phenomenon of people healing themselves through intent and through miraculous processes. As Joe Dispenza presents it in his book, the placebo is based on three different aspects. One is past conditioning. You take a little white pill, the white pill relieves your headache. Every time you have a headache, you take a little white pill. It's labeled aspirin, and you feel better. Someone gives you another little white pill. It's just starch, but your headache goes away. So part of the effect of a placebo is past behavior. You come to believe that an aspirin is going to take away your headache. And because you believe it, even though it's not an aspirin, your headache goes away. Because your body manufactures its own painkiller through thought alone. Another aspect of the placebo effect is future expectations. You believe that in about 20 minutes, your headache is going to go away. And this is a very important point. The placebo effect and all healing, according to Dispenza, is involved with a focus of the mind on a positive future. So that if you can organize your expectations clearly enough, your body will experience it in the present, as it understands it to be in the future. So past conditioning has a very important role to play. Future expectations have a very important role to play, particularly when they're associated with positive emotions. When you think, oh, my headache is going to go away, what do you feel? You feel relief. You feel joy. You feel better about yourself. You feel more energized because your pain has gone away. So that future expectation, coupled with positive emotions, is a critical aspect of the placebo. And then thirdly, is the whole category that he calls assigned meaning, where the doctor comes in and says, this pill is going to cure your Parkinson's because it's the most powerful pill science has ever developed. And it's going to create so much dopamine in your brain that you're going to get better real fast. So what the doctor has done is assigned meaning to this little pill that he's going to ask you to take once a day, every morning for 6 weeks. You don't know that it's a placebo. But because you believe the doctor, and you have this image of all this dopamine going on in your brain, your body, through thought alone, becomes its own pharmacy. You don't need the drug. You just need clear intention and positive emotions. That's the essence of the placebo. Now, there's some things that he mentions, which you get in all the literature, that the color of the pill makes a difference. Blue pills work better than red pills. The names make a difference. You may wonder why so many of these pharmaceuticals are almost incomprehensible, and they're almost, you can't hardly figure out how to say them, because the more complicated the name is, the more people believe it's actually going to work. Names that rhyme. It's no accident that Viagra rhymes with Niagara. That's a lot of flow. And so names that rhyme with what you have an association with are an important part of the efficacy of a placebo. If you charge more for the placebo, the statistics of its efficacy go up. If the doctor is very enthusiastic, the efficacy of the placebo goes up. And the reverse is also true. He cites an example of a man who was told by his doctor that he had cancer and was going to probably be dead in 3 months. The man believed him, went home, put his affairs in order. It happened to be around the end of the year. He celebrated Christmas with his family, and right on time, 90 days, he drops dead. They did an autopsy, and they found that he had a very little bit of cancer, early stage cancer. He died not because of the cancer. He died because he believed his doctor. And there are scores of stories like that. So when the doctor says, sorry, you've got 6 months, you got 9 months, you got 3 months, if you internalize that, that's going to become true. They've also found out that, when the doctor tells patients, cancer patients in particular, well, one of the side effects of chemotherapy is that after the therapy, you'll become nauseous. Well, because nausea is so commonly associated with chemotherapy, 50% of the patients get nauseous on their way to their first treatment. So they come down with the side effects before they even have the treatment. They've done studies, and depression is the one that's actually, as I understand it, is the most susceptible to placebo. That if you take Prozac or Adderall or any of these antidepressants, and you give them a sugar pill, 80% of the placebo patients perform as well or better than the people that are actually taking the Prozac, for example, or the antidepressant. They've done these dental studies where the doctor is going to do some major surgery. He has to inject big time painkiller, and he tells the patient, I'm going to inject this painkiller, and all he injects is some saline water. And 50% of the patients going major dental surgery don't feel any pain. They've even done studies where they inject the patient with morphine, and the pain comes back. Remember, the placebo is your body becoming its own pharmaceutical manufacturing firm. You manufacture the morphine, you go through the operation, don't feel anything, even though you've been injected with saline water. They then give you an injection that's anti-morphine, and immediately the pain rushes back because the injection knocks out your self-manufactured morphine. It's really quite extraordinary. They've done studies with Parkinson patients, and there's an interesting twist on this particular study where they found that the Parkinson's patients given the placebo produced 200 times the dopamine that you would receive if you took the real pill. And the doctors at first didn't believe that that was actually true. So they started to inject this, this magnetic or dye that would go to where the dopamine receiver sites are, and but all the receiver sites were already filled from the body's own dopamine. Now, what happened is that after the patients went back home, got into their normal cycles of life and behavior and expectations, the symptoms would come back. So the placebo effect can be permanent in some cases, but it can also be impermanent. It can be reversed. If you go back into a situation that brings you back into old emotions, old expectations, old patterns. And they've even found that if a patient knows about side effects of the pharmaceutical drug, even though they're taking the placebo, many of the people who are cured by the placebo will also get the side effects of the actual pharmaceutical that they aren't taking. It's quite an extraordinary thing, this notion of the placebo. What it basically is revolving around is that the symbol becomes the placebo becomes a symbol of possibility, a clear intention with elevated emotions around a certain outcome does wonders for the body, for the mind, and for the soul. And that, I think, is the essence, and we'll go into a lot more detail next time with his actual formula, Joe Dispenza's actual formula. But I want to tease out 3 or 4 themes that I'd like to have you contemplate. The first is that the placebo manipulates our sense of time. Most of us live the present moment out of patterns conditioned by our past. So one of the fundamental reasons why a placebo works is it alters our relationship with time. So instead of thinking, oh, you know, this is going to happen all over again, and I've been in pain for the last 30 years, and I'm going to be in pain again today, and I'll be in pain again tomorrow. The placebo cuts through that with a reordering of your relationship to a future state that disconnects you from your past and your present. For all practical purposes, when you take a placebo, you believe in the future with positive emotions, your past disappears. Your past disappears. Dispenza reiterates multiple times in his lectures and in his books that the average person thinks between 60 and 70,000 thoughts every day. And 95, 98% are the same thoughts that you thought yesterday. And that's why you don't heal. So a key point, just to put in those beautiful minds of yours, is your relationship to time. Are you a product of your past? Are you a product of your future? Are you a product of your conditioning? Tomorrow is going to be basically like yesterday. basically like today? Or are you going to create something different by believing another set of possibilities? And what Dispenza is demonstrating scientifically, because he measures everybody's brainwaves, the person cured of Parkinson's, the person cured of fourth stage cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, prostatitis, all kinds of diseases. He's measuring them all scientifically. And he tells of one woman who had a severe Parkinson. She hadn't been able to stand up for many years. She went to one of his sessions, and in a single meditation, realized that she could do this. She worked on herself for 2 years, came back to one of his sessions, and went up on stage. She stood up, she walked around the stage, she showed people that she had a calm hand. And she says, I worked day by day, meditation by meditation. And finally, I got here. And that's a point that Dispenza makes. Don't think that you can just do this in one go, although it's possible. But the conditioning that you experience from your past is so strong. It takes time to work through. This woman took 2 years, but she stayed at it every single day. And finally, she was cured. There was a woman in the audience with the same condition. And she thought, if this woman can do it, I can do it. And she cured herself in 2 months. And this is a very important point that connects what Dispenza teaches with Rupert Sheldrake. That if one person breaks through, it makes it easier for anybody else with the same disease to break through in a shorter period of time. You know, it's like the 4-minute mile. For a long time, science said the human being cannot run a 4-minute mile. We're not structured that way. And then somebody did it. And now over 1,400 people have run the 4-minute mile. It's considered normal. Rupert talks about this in his books on morphogenic resonance, where if you take a maze of rats, say in San Francisco in January, and you give them a complicated maze, they will do it in X time. If 2 months later you give a set of rats, say in New York, the same maze, they will do it in X minus Y time. And so forth. You know, it took a genius like Einstein to figure out E equals MC squared. And now every high schooler in the world knows about E equals MC squared. So once there's a breakthrough in the psychic field, in the, you know, what Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere, by anybody anywhere, it makes it easier for everybody everywhere to experience the same thing. And you noted in the firewalking ceremony, it was a group contagion. It's been done. We know it can be done. The group facilitators have done it many times. You can do it. We can all do it. We work each other up, and then the whole group goes through, and not a single person is burned, because there's the phenomenon of a group contagion that can heal as well as drive a crowd into a killing frenzy. So we need to be careful that, as Dispenza says over and over, thoughts can wound, thoughts can create disease, thoughts can kill you. And thoughts can also bring healing, bring joy, and bring vitality. So this relationship with time is a very important aspect of the placebo. Another point that he makes, which is worth contemplating, is that we will only accept a thought that's equal to or stronger than our emotion if we're going to change. If you're in a fear-based modality, let's say, you were traumatized by your parents when you were a child. You've basically been living in fear and insecurity ever since. All your patternings are fear-based. You can't begin the process of healing till your thought is stronger than the emotion of fear based on your past conditioning. If you take that placebo and you don't believe it's going to work, it won't. If you take the Prozac and you don't believe it's going to work, it will inhibit the efficacy even of the real pharmaceutical. So that the spiritual exercise that Dispenza leads his classes through is developing a capacity in your mind that is stronger than the emotions that tie you to your past. And he makes up the point multiple times in multiple ways. So does Carolyn Mace, by the way. She wrote a book called Why People Don't Heal, that we're addicted to our wounds. We're addicted to our pain. We had some experience 35 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago that was completely traumatizing. And we let it control our lives. And the more we experience that trauma over and over again in different ways, we talk about it, we think about it, we rehearse it in our mind, we feel the pain, we become addicted. The body literally becomes addicted to our wounds. And he tells very powerful story of how there's this one woman from Austria who's had a seemingly happy family, a couple of kids, husband says goodbye to her and the kids one day, goes to the top of a building, no, is in Holland actually, is in Rotterdam, and throws himself off the cliff, off the top of the building, kills himself. When she was informed by the police that her husband, who she thought was okay, had killed himself, that shock, that trauma completely destroyed her life. She became unstable in her psyche. She couldn't sleep. She began to become ill. She couldn't keep up with her job. Her whole life collapsed because she couldn't internalize that trauma. And then she went to one of Dispenza's workshops. And over a several-year period, she began to recreate her self-image as a positive, strong, beautiful, healthy woman. And slowly the effect of the trauma began to dissipate away. Go into your own psyche. How much is your present reality governed by a trauma from the past that allows you all kinds of self-justifications and self-pity and the nurturance of a wound that inhibits you from being as vital as you would actually want to be? That is the irritant in the oyster that Joe Dispenza works with all his groups to develop the will to power, literally, to use Nietzsche's term, to set an intention associated with positive emotions with such clarity and belief that literally your past and everything that has ensnared and wounded you literally drops away. And that's why the title of his book is You Are the Placebo. So the question is, and with this we close, do you need an external substance to heal? Do you need a pharmacy that you go to downtown with a prescription from your doctor? Or is it possible to be your own pharmacy through thought and belief alone? If that's true, then the deeper question is, which we'll take up next time, how do we build up our internal fortitude, intention, thought, belief, mind to such a strength that we activate the pharmacy within? The extraordinary thing is that there's nothing simpler than taking a placebo. So self-healing is simultaneously the hardest thing in the world and the easiest. And that's the conundrum of self-realization. The kingdom of God is within us. We know that. All the dopamine I need is right inside. But how many of us can find it? What is the pathway to that door? That's the placebo. Thank you, everyone. Now I see we have about 30 minutes. I want to turn it over to our distinguished Dean of Graduate Studies, my good friend, Georgie Szabo, and then want to hear from all you students with your questions and comments as soon as Georgie's done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, dear Jim. Your lectures are always amazing and very passionate. I was so pleased when you have chosen Joe Dispenza's book. I saw him first in the What the Bleep Do We Know in 2005, I think, and he really jumped out for me as one of the most articulate and eloquent speaker. And straight away I went to buy his book, which was published 13 years ago, this one. And I just actually got it out a couple of days ago, and I was looking through it, and I was trying to compare it with his new book, You Are the Placebo. But before that, I'd like to say that I met him once in person, and it was in Vienna. There was a conference I was with Professor Erwin Laszlo. And I said to him, oh my gosh, Joe Dispenza is here. You must meet him because he's so amazing. Blah, blah, blah. And Erwin he was a little bit jealous. So I dragged him over to Joe, and everyone said to Joe, well, Mr. Dispenza, my assistant is, very passionate about you. So I'd like to meet you. And then Joe was looking at us and he was totally nonplussed. And I really liked his attitude, that he was just like, so no big ego, like Deepak Chopra and some others. And I really hope that he remains, I think, this little ego. I think he is so, as I watched some of his YouTube videos. What I'd like to really comment on observing his evolution, that how much, the title of his book, The Evolve Your Brain, this is a very neuroscientific approach in 13 years ago book. And this one is so much more about believing in yourself, right? So that's the main message of his book. That's what I got from it, that he really evolved from that, just about that how you influence your brain. It is, we all know it's not just about our brain, right? It's just the whole person, and the whole person is so much greater than just our physical body. And as I was going through this book, I have so much kind of like underlines and circles and everywhere, that I got to 2 pages, and one of which that you were pointing to about our genetic inheritance. He says that it is true that the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, but that doesn't mean that it cannot roll to another location. And the way you roll to another location is by learning. And it's learning about yourself, learning about ourselves. Who are we? So referring to what you were saying, that the Dalai Lama and some other wisdom teachers, they have this conceptual framework within which they really frame their wisdom. For me, that is a little bit essential in order to learn who I am, right? And for me, that's Buddhism. For somebody else, it's Hinduism or Taoism, Christianity, or I don't know. And you were asking the question, the self-pharmacy. Since really I read Joe Dispenza's first book and lots of books about shamans and healers, I haven't been taken a medicine. It's not the medicine anyway to me. Medicine is really natural, and that's really, really within. And as you remember, it was only you and I when we went to Tibet out of the whole group who haven't taken any of the high altitude tablets, because we had the belief that we will be all right, and so we were. When you were referring to time, Nassim Haramein, he says that memory equals time. There is no memory, there is no time, and vice versa. So, and then what Joe Dispenza said, that yes, you inherit so many things, all the experiences, karmic experience, whatever else from genetically, but it doesn't mean that you can't change that. Right. So, but for that, I think it is essential that how you learn about yourself. I love Joe Dispenza's very clear, cutting-edge scientific expression of how powerful you are. And I really wish we were accessing this power within. Our world would be a different place right now, wouldn't it? So I think that self-learning is essential, and he's a great teacher, and I like his teaching very much, and also that how he guides his students and his conference participants for meditation, because within meditation you experience the no self, the no time, the no body, the no space, and that's the infinite possibility that you were talking about as well. And that's just like, we need to realize that how amazing we are, and we could really self-heal and co-create a greater world. But thank you, Jim. It's a wonderful book, really wonderful book, and I would love to go to Joe Dispenza's conference, because I'm sure it's amazing. So anyway, thank you so much, and passing it on to our audience.
Good. Well, thank you, Georgie. We'll hear Patricia in a moment, but I just wanted to make two comments on your remarks. The first is that I think, you know, your own attitude around the pharmaceuticals and the medical establishment is well worth all of us thinking about in a time of a pandemic, when all the messaging we're receiving is that we're potentially susceptible, keep your distance, you don't want to get any bugs, particularly if you're over 55. And boy, do we have a vaccine coming for you, right? Beware of that, everyone. It's based on fear. It's based on impartial science. And it is going to bring massive numbers of profits to some companies that come up with a vaccine after the virus has gone away. And so I don't want to take any particular position, but I think the conditioning that the culture is now bombarding us with, to be afraid, to be weak, and if you only take this pill, you're going to make it okay, is an insidious message. You are your own placebo. Your thoughts, your emotions, your choices are a better protection against a virus than any vaccine. You've got to work on it. And next time we're going to go into it, and I'd like to even have everyone go into a short meditation, because Joe Dispenza does meditation better than anybody I've ever experienced. The guy is an extraordinary meditation teacher, and we're going to talk about this whole process that he leads people through. But just Georgie's point of, you know, everybody says you go to a certain altitude, of course you have to take the pills. Well, actually you don't. Actually you don't. And it is the capacity to self-regulate and self-empower that to a large degree is what is most efficacious. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, but let's go to Patricia and then Raffaello. Patricia, and then Michelle Blair. Thank you, Georgie. Did Patricia surface?
Yep.
Raffaello.
Yeah.
There she is. Hi, Patricia.
Hello. Well, I love this book, and I have a question or something that I find interesting and sort of fascinating, and I wanted to get your take on it. After just a brief aside, when you interviewed or had the discussion with Gabor Mate, who I loved, fellow Canadian, I know his work very well, he mentioned Jeffrey Reidiger's Cured, which I got immediately and I read, and he also delves into the placebo. So I got this right away when I decided to take the course. So one thing that I was very curious about is his chapter 6 on suggestibility. And he talks about how, I don't know if you remember that one, where he actually has somebody someone gets hypnotized to commit a murder, which in fact is a stage thing with a stuntman. So, and he writes that 5 to 10% of people are incredibly susceptible to hypnosis. And I have gone into a couple voluntarily hypnosis sessions. So I was curious, when I went to look at his meditation, there is a meditation called You Are the Placebo, and it is exceptionally hypnotic. He actually uses hypnosis techniques to get you throughout the whole meditation. So I just wanted you to speak to that, and I'm very curious about that.
Well, you know, that's a great question. You know, Joe does very playfully say, you know, he parodies these late night commercials where you see, you know, a middle-aged woman with sciatica. And then, you know, this can happen to you. And he details how these commercials basically put you in a trance state. Watching TV puts you in a trance state. And when you're watching TV, you become more susceptible to the commercials. So you just all should be conscious of that. When you're watching TV, you're going into trance. That's part of how it all works. And you become more susceptible to the commercials. So he says, heck, if it works for the pharmaceutical industries, how about using suggestibility to become a mystic? And if you subscribe to Gaia, you can take his program called Becoming Superhuman. I recommend it to everybody. And there's another one on Gaia called Rewired. But the 8th and final episode of Becoming Superhuman on Gaia is a 50-minute trance where you look at a kaleidoscope, and he deliberately takes you into trance so that you can be infused with some of the most beautiful images of mystical illumination. And I've looked at it a couple of dozen times. And he says, and remember the image. And it's this image of this man with his pineal gland, his third eye, in blazing light. And you're looking at this image, and then it goes dark, and then remember the image. I'd rather remember the image of a man in complete enlightenment. And then there's another one of a beautiful woman with a vertical line going from the top of her head all the way down and into the pool of the cosmos in silvers and blues. And it is just remarkable. And you hold these images of your masculine and feminine sides in a trance state. I'd rather remember that than, you know, a Mercedes-Benz commercial or, you know, an Adderall commercial. But you're making a very important point, Patricia. Adolf Hitler put people in a trance state. Trump has put 40% of the American public and the Republican Party in a trance state. We can too. But we need to understand that these are technologies that can be used for light and dark dimensions. And that's why we need to be conscious. And we need to be in community. And we need to always test the teachers for integrity and clarity and transparency. So thank you for that point. It's a very, very important one. Raffaello.
Hi, Jim. Hi, everyone. I have to admit that for many months since I heard about Joe Dispenza, I had a resistance. You know, it was like a part of me was in prejudice. Oh, another teacher from the same part of the world, California, with a new theory that's gonna save us all and enlighten us all. But thanks to your presentation, I feel much more motivated now to actually go there, and I feel the depth. And I haven't started his book yet, but will do soon. The comment I wanted to make when you were speaking about placebo, my mind immediately went on a sidetrack, but related, I believe, which was about altered states of consciousness and psychedelic substances, you know, even from the most common ones like coffee and alcohol. I, for one, when I drink decaffeinated coffee, I know that it is decaffeinated coffee, so it's not a regular placebo situation. You know, I know that the substance lacks the alkaloid of caffeine, but I experience many of the effects of a regular coffee, both on a mental and on a physical level, because my body's so used to that. And in my younger years, when I was experimenting with more like, recreational drugs and psychotropic substances, I started to notice after a while that if I just recreated the conditions of sound and light and, amount of people, my body would go into producing whatever hormones in the brain and not just in the brain, but in the whole body, in the guts and in the heart, that would take me into a very similar state of consciousness without the need for the substance. So it's really incredible. And I have to say, though, that in those cases, sometimes I was upset because I couldn't control this effect. So there was a mixture of placebo and Pavlovian conditioning or reflex on a very complex scale. So just wanted to, make that comment and like, we can probably in this way also influence or like take ourselves into all sorts of altered states of consciousness and perceptions that are usually associated with huge disruptions of the normal functioning of the brain in this way, through placebo means. So just wanted to present that.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, that's one of the things that I like about Dispenza. He doesn't believe in any exogenous substances. He says you can do this by thought alone. And he plays with the audience. He says you don't have to be a vegan. You don't have to be a vegetarian. You don't have to be a teetotaler. You don't have to be thin. You don't have to be anything. You can come in, you don't have to have meditated. If you can get what I'm saying from any walk of life, you can engage in a recreation of your body, mind, and spirit through thought alone. And that's a remarkable teaching. If you think of most of the major traditions, you've got to believe that Jesus is your savior, you got to walk the Eightfold path, or you've got to do X, or you got to do Y, and you got to do something in order to get down the road. And Dispenza says, no. You just need to go through a certain scientific formula around creating an intention through thought alone, bringing it into alignment with elevated emotions, and focusing on it day by day by day by day by day. And your life is going to change, because that's going to change the chemistry of your body. It's rather a remarkable teaching, and very simple. And what makes it beautiful, it makes it accessible to every single human being. Nobody's excluded. It's really an amazing thing. And so thank you, sir. Always good to see you. By the way, everyone, Raffaello just wrote an amazing post paper that I luxuriated in last week. So I just want to acknowledge that, Raffaello. He's one of our stellar students. Michelle, another one. Hi, Michelle.
Hello. Hi, Jim. Hi, Georgie and everyone. Oh, gosh, this is just perfect timing. I am so grateful, first of all, that I am a student of wisdom and ubiquity, because I have learned throughout the last years things that changed my life when I started to apply them. And this is the most brilliant book, especially coming after Nietzsche's book of understanding what power is and the will to power. And then with this whole virus and I felt myself in the last several months being in the hot box of everything that was triggering my emotional state. And ironically, I had actually read Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Yourself, many years ago, but it didn't change my life because I was still so addicted to the traumas of my life that it became in my head. And the thing that's changed for me is understanding, I guess maybe I just wasn't ready until now, that what I didn't understand was the contribution of emotion. So even though I have been through many stages of training of different modalities, and probably the most significant one has been, for the last 6 years, I've been doing brain entrainment, using subliminal messages to, I guess, to feed my subconscious, because it's just like Dispenza says, we're 95% acting from our subconscious. But what I didn't understand was I was being passive. I didn't understand until I really got back into Dispenza's work the last few months that that I would start with his meditations with intention, and then using these I'll call them the birthright emotions or elevated emotions as amplifiers that would then change. So I have a specific addiction that I realized that I needed to, I didn't understand it because, again, I was justified because it's to a person, because of trauma and what I think how it should be. And then I realized that if I've created this reality I'm experiencing, then I have the power to decreate what I'm experiencing. And so through thought and choice. So, and then the thing I kept thinking about is, well, golly, we always talk about transformation. And I said, well, what I'm really looking for is a bifurcation, to bifurcate my reality, to take it to a whole different. And so now time, like you talked about, Jim, is now, we have a different relationship to it. So there is no more speed of light. When I'm enter that quantum field, which is, so it's just another, like, for me, this last, and I, of course, after studying this book, then I went to Superhuman, and I went, golly, I really am responsible for my heaven on earth and my reality, and never to give my power over to, a vaccination or a teacher or to what I think is justified. So anyway, I'm so grateful that there's many people that are studying and on this path, because I just want to go do one of his advanced trainings, and after reading about him, to really put myself in that particular group energy and experience it, to get it into my body, to embody it. Yeah. But otherwise, I'll just keep doing it daily.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been doing. Thank you so much, Michelle. I think, a point that I would make about what you're saying is that the pandemic, because it's deconstructing our world so dramatically and suddenly, is also deconstructing our psyches. Mm-hmm. So we're all more susceptible now to a lot of things. And we need to understand that. And in understanding that, that's where Joe Dispenza can be a very, very important. There's somebody that was saying in the chat, well, does this mean that we should follow the right wingers who want the economy to reopen, at whatever cost? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that as at a much deeper level, I'm not talking about state policy. The United States is really becoming a failed state. That's the truth. And the pandemic is revealing the complete sort of corruption of the US infrastructure and government, right? And that's why we have the highest pandemic deaths in the world, because we've despoiled our environment, we've polluted our cities, we've corrupted our food, we've decimated our medical system. The United States now ranks last in medical health and well-being in all the industrial countries in the world. We're now last, right? So the pandemic is revealing the weakness that is there, and the divisiveness, the right wing, left wing, the protest is only happening in the United States. It's happening nowhere else. And it's a symptom of how sick we have become as a society. So I'm not at all saying we should open up. What I'm interested in is you as an individual, as we all navigate, and Wisdom University as a community, of which Michelle and Raffaello and most of you are a part, that we need to nurture our own selves with clear intention and elevated emotion. And we're going to get into it more next time. But the key emotion that we need to be cultivating right now is gratitude. Gratitude that we're alive. Gratitude that we have families. Gratitude that we have people that love us, that we love. Gratitude that it's a sunny day. Gratitude that we are healthy. And the more we practice gratitude, the more we practice positive emotions, the more capable we're going to be of navigating through the pandemic and all the craziness that's happening in the United States around the pandemic. So that's really what I'm addressing. And I think, Michelle, you've really touched on that nexus point. So I really want to thank you for your contribution. And I hope you're safe and your family is strong and everybody is well.
Thank you.
Anika, you'll be our final. We got Anika and Yan Jung Song, and then we'll close because we're just about at the end of the time.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. And if you could be as brief as possible, I know that Georg has got family responsibilities, so I don't want to take too long.
No problem. I haven't finished the book. I've read about a third. And when I saw the book on the list, I hadn't really heard of Joe Dispenza, so I Googled a little bit and I started reading. And my gut feeling and response was I was not all enthusiastic. I totally agree with the basic things that we're not really using the capability of our body. And as somebody who comes from the holistic health field, I've read a lot about epigenetics and all the neurochemistry and the power of that. And I've studied, Bruce Lipton and Eckhart Tolle and a lot of that. But there's something, I'm glad Patricia mentioned that, but about the packaging that I have a problem with. And Patricia talked about the suggestibility and also that Jim mentioned Hitler and the mass hysteria, the mass suggestion. And I'm just worried that people do this. And it's like, I haven't read the whole book, I haven't gotten into the details of how he does the meditation. But when he describes how he did it himself, there was like a white knuckling to reach this space where he could heal his spine. And I'm just worried about people who can't do that and who try and they fail, that they see themselves as failure, that they are not able to heal themselves. Because we're really talking about the territory of miracles. And I know where Carolyn Mice, she talks about it's where God bends the law of nature only for you, basically. And I'm just worried about we can talk more about this next time. But that's where I sort of have little red light flashing. And when we raise our consciousness, we want to take the environment with us and make some changes so we interact different with the environment as we heal ourselves.
Yeah, very, very important point. Thank you for making it. We always need to take any teaching with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And always make sure that it passes the standard of our own sense of integrity and truth. And that applies to Joe Dispenza, just like it applies to the Dalai Lama, the Pope, and anybody else out there, on the kind of the guru circuit. and there are people who struggle and can't eliminate the pain, and that's what's true for them, and we need to honor that. And there's many roads to Rome, and all roads lead to Rome. And so thank you for that that comment. It's very, very true, and I hope to go into more detail on some of those aspects next time.
Okay. I'll have finished the book by then, so I may have a different point of view. Who knows?
Yanson.
Hello. I remembered Gandhi. He said, "Every night I die, and every morning I alive again." So about the memory, the past can be, we don't need to hold. It's not maybe it's not real. So every moment and every day, every moment, we are fresh. And like Georgie said, we are connecting with the consciousness of the universe. So I feel the past, the memory is not very real. So the detachment and attachment, it's in your hand.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a very important point. And there's always it's a paradox, isn't it? We're the product of our past. And yet we have to rework our past in order to be liberated into the future. So there's always this dialectical tension, because the past shapes the present unfolds into the future, but we can't let the past enslave us and prevent us from creating a new future. And I think that's what Dispenza, almost more than anything else, is trying to get us to see, is that the wounds from our past, they're wounds. They hurt us badly, but we can let them go. And it takes a superhuman effort to let some of the traumas of our lives, the diseases, the illnesses, the accidents, the divorce, the deaths, everything that goes on that really binds us in negative emotions. Somehow we have to come up with an intention and positive emotions that are stronger than those negative emotions in order to liberate us to become more whole and more healed. I really thank you, Yanjung, for these comments. And I want to also just note, because I think what Yanjung is saying is relevant in relationship to what Linda White said in the chat, that this also brings into view the value of relationships in healing, particularly when the trauma was created within the relationship initially. That is such an important point, Linda. Thank you. And that's a good point with which to end. And that is that we've got to love one another more intensely now, because we're being told that we have to socially distance ourselves from each other. How do I hug you when I can't touch you? Think that thought. How do I hug you when I can't touch you? How do I kiss you? How do I love you when all I have is myself and I'm being told to stay distant from any other human being? For the good of the all. We're all doing it because we know that in some sense it's important. But the challenges and the questions that are now arising are even more profound during the pandemic than they were before the pandemic, where you could walk up and shake a hand. Like in France, you kiss them 3 times on the cheeks and you felt instant intimacy, but you didn't even think about it. There's been articles about the trauma in France because they're realizing they can't just be kissing each other after the pandemic like they were before the pandemic. What's that going to do to fridge culture? How do I hug you when I can't touch you? How can I love you if I can't touch you? That's a question worth pondering. And we'll take this up and other things in our next session. By the way, I wanted to announce that next month, starting next month, the great books will be at 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, not 8 o'clock, because we're starting Humanity Rising, as you all know from the email that you've received, which is very, very exciting. I've been working 24/7, literally around the clock. So our courses will not be at 8 a.m. anymore. They'll be at 11 a.m. Pacific time, but we'll send that out to everybody. So even though I can't touch any of you, I hug all of you during this time of COVID-19. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.